before being put in authority by Pharaoh because of Joseph's ability to read dreams. His brothers intended the act for evil. They were jealous of their brother. They wanted to see Joseph gone, out of the picture. Yet Joseph said God intended it for good, for without being sold into slavery, Joseph would have never been able to become Pharaoh's right-hand man and be in a position to save his people from the 7-year famine. It seems like Joseph is saying that in order for the good to happen, he first had to endure the bad. In order to be in the position he was to help God's people, he first had to suffer, and suffer a lot. And we buy into that way of thinking, don't we? I mean, on both macro and micro scales. Think about it. You can't be a true artist if you haven't suffered unimaginable heartbreak or trauma, because art comes from a place of pain. You can't be a true comedian if you don't have some dark past or mental health struggles. You can't join this fraternity or that sorority unless you go through rigorous and sometimes cruel vetting and initiation rites. You can't get the lead in the play until you first spend 4 years working with a company and doing all the grunt work of set building. Just because I took out student loans and I have to pay them back, you, next generation, shouldn't get free college. Because I went through it, you have to as well. That's the only way. There are so many ways in this world where we endorse this view that one has to suffer to somehow be great or to do good things. And what's worse is we sometimes then assign the cause of that suffering to God, or make that suffering a part of God's plan, because God was in the good that came after. So wouldn't God also have to have caused the bad? I think we put such importance on suffering and struggle because no one wants to go through it. No one wants to or seeks out adversity or pain, usually. Yet we all, in one way or another, have certainly faced it in our lives. We've all had our suffering and we all will have more. And we don't want that suffering to be meaningless. We don't want it to be for nothing. So we don't get to the success we have. Like Joseph did in forgiving his brothers, we connect the two and turn the suffering into a positive by saying, I wouldn't be the person I am now or the position I am now if I hadn't faced that, or if I hadn't been confronted with this suffering. Because we can't tie that suffering to something good if we just let that suffering be what it is. And what was the point of it? It becomes just suffering, with no reason to exist beyond a cruel thing in our lives. We want to give it meaning, so like Joseph, we can say he meant it for ill, but God meant it for good. This is the only way we can make that suffering make sense. Yet we know suffering does not come directly from God. You've heard my sermon before about why bad things happen. We live in a broken and sinful world, and where there is sin, there will be suffering. Where there is sin, there will be pain. Where there is sin, there will be brothers throwing one another into a pit and selling them into slavery. That's what the devil and that's what sin does. It causes suffering. And our question is, how do we face that suffering world? How do we face the suffering in a way that doesn't endorse, like we so often do, or make it a necessary part of life? Because ending suffering is not necessary. And I know that can sound radical, but you should not have to suffer for blessings to come to you. You should not have to suffer to be a better person. You should not have to suffer just to exist or have the right to exist in this world. God does not want us to suffer. But we do have to face a world where suffering exists. So how do we do that? I think we take the attitude of Joseph in the first reading. We do that in two ways. First, although his wording is a little difficult, we see how suffering has shaped us into the people we are today. We don't lose the fact that it was suffering and that it was terrible and that we would still be amazing people without the suffering, but we can see the silver lining. We can see how it did get us where we are, not in a way that exalts the suffering or makes it necessary, but in seeing that God is active even in the suffering, helping us through, just as much as sin is active in causing the suffering. We can also be like Joseph and Jesus in our gospel and look at our lives from a prism of forgiveness. Joseph could have easily held a grudge against his brothers, turned them out, called them out of their blatant lie over their father's last words. Joseph had every right to be angry for the suffering they caused him. But instead he offers forgiveness. That same forgiveness we hear about in the gospel. And I think Jesus is so abundant with the idea of forgiveness in the gospel because he knows the immense amount of sin and suffering in the world and the immense amount of suffering we will incur on others. The only way to face that is if we are able to forgive each other. If we kept holding all the grudges against everyone who caused us pain, well, I wouldn't be talking to my husband right now. And we wouldn't have any friends or people we were close to. In this constant barrage of sin we have to meet in the world, we have to meet that sin with forgiveness. Or just like in the parable, we will become perpetrators again of that suffering and sin. The servant is extended grace and his debts is forgiven, but instead of passing that forgiveness along, he is beholden to sin and causes suffering for another. We have been forgiven by God, and if we don't offer that forgiveness to others, we become perpetrators